DC Studios recently announced that they are developing an animated series based on Absolute Batman. Considering the first issue became one of the biggest selling comic releases of 2024 and the series has continued to perform incredibly well, it isn't hard to see why. When I first heard about it, I remember asking myself, how is a poor Batman supposed to work? Isn't his superpower supposed to be rich?
Your superpowers again? I'm rich.
Batman has always been synonymous with wealth. The Batcave, the Batmobile, the gadgets, blah, blah, blah. Take away the billions and what exactly do you have left? So before the animated series arrives, I decided to finally sit down and read the first story arc of Absolute Batman, The Zoo, covering issues 1 through 6. I went into it expecting to answer one question. Can Batman still be Batman without billions? 6 issues later, I think I was asking the wrong question. We weren't supposed to ask whether Batman is poor. One of the smartest things this comic does is quietly shift your attention. Yes, Bruce Wayne doesn't have billions. Yes, he's an engineer of some sort instead of a billionaire CEO. But after the first couple of issues, I honestly stopped thinking about his bank account. Instead, I started asking something else. What kind of Gotham creates this version of Batman? Gotham has always been corrupt. That's nothing new. What surprised me was how much time Absolute Batman spends asking how that corruption works. Instead of treating corruption as background noise, this story treats it like an entire economic system, and this time Batman's role is different. He's not just standing above Gotham trying to save it, he is one of the people living inside it. This was probably my biggest surprise. When people had poor Batman, okay fine. When I had poor Batman, I imagined a weaker Batman. But that isn't what Snyder gave us. Instead, he gives us a resourceful Batman. Bruce doesn't solve problems by opening another Wayne Enterprises account. He looks at the materials around him and asks, what can I build? His gadgets aren't symbols of endless wealth, they're symbols of creativity, and I love that. At one point, I caught myself thinking, okay, where did he even get this? Only for the comic to remind me that this Bruce spends his days building infrastructure. Of course, he'd understand materials. Of course, he'd know engineering. It feels like something created by someone who understands how things are put together. Does this comic occasionally stretch believability? Sure. There are moments where I thought, that's a lot of equipment for someone who's supposed to be working with limited resources. But I never felt like the comic completely ignored the question. Instead, it kept showing me that Bruce's greatest resource was never the money, it was his mind. He is still Batman. That's something I really appreciated. Changing Batman's circumstances is one thing, changing Batman himself entirely is another. Thankfully, this comic understands the difference. Bruce is still observant, still analytical, still connecting dots before everyone else. One of my favorite details is that while Alfred is quietly piecing together Batman's identity, Bruce is doing exactly the same thing with the people around him. Even though he is massive, and I'm telling you, that boy is huge and looks like more of a fighter, he's still a detective first. That is Batman. Speaking of Alfred, can you talk about how different this version is? I was used to the tea-making butler. This Alfred looks like he's been ready for retirement as soon as yesterday. He's a sort of an agent spy, someone who's been surviving in dangerous situations and places. He's incredibly observant and practical, kind of pessimistic, and yet, despite not having the father-son relationship we're used to seeing, he still shows up. There's something strangely touching about that. He extends grace to Bruce before Bruce has really earned it. He's constantly evaluating him, but he's also protecting him. It's a very different Alfred, yet somehow it still feels like Alfred. And Bruce finally feels like part of Gotham. One thing I didn't expect to enjoy as much as I did was seeing Bruce surrounded by people. Batman is usually portrayed as isolated, almost mythological. This Bruce isn't. Seeing moments like Selina taking him to watch a movie and having his other friends show up was nice. Those scenes matter and remind us that Bruce didn't emerge from a cave one night and just started fighting people. He grew up here, he belonged here, and because of that, Gotham feels less like his responsibility and more like his home, though having his enemies as his friends deduce the future. Roman Sionis, how do you pronounce that last name? Anyway, Roman is unsettling. Keeping the faces of his victims is horrifying enough, but what really interested me was what he represents. He isn't simply Batman's opposite because he's evil. In many ways, they are surprisingly similar. Both are strategic, think several moves ahead, both understand that fear is one of the most powerful forces in Gotham. You should see Bruce wearing a vampire costume scaring criminals. The difference isn't their intelligence, it's what they believe people are worth. Bruce looks at Gotham's suffering and sees lives worth protecting. Roma looks at that same suffering and sees an opportunity. He profits from hurting Gotham. That makes him a perfect villain for this story, and yet, I never felt like he was the final boss. Even before the ending, I kept thinking, this can't be the biggest threat. Then the comic teases the Joker, a wealthy man who never laughs, and suddenly I had more questions than answers, which honestly is exactly where I want a fast story arc to leave me. When we talk about themes, the real theme here isn't poverty, it's hope, or maybe the cost of hope. This Gotham doesn't reward optimism. Every institution seems compromised. Every system seems designed to fail. Trying to do the right thing almost feels naive, like a recipe for heartbreak. And yet, Bruce refuses to give up. So does Martha, so does Jim. They continue fighting for a city that rarely gives them a reason to believe it will ever change. That's what stayed with me after I finished issue 6. Hope. Hope that survives in a place specifically designed to destroy it. You hear that, dark side? What didn't work? Honestly, not much. This is one of those rare fast arcs where I found myself wanting the next issue more than I wanted the story to end. My biggest criticism is probably the same question many readers will have. Bruce occasionally seems almost too resourceful. The comic explains a lot, his engineering background helps, and this dude is a genius. But every now and then you'll probably raise an eyebrow and think, okay, how did you actually manage that? I also think Alfred's last minute intervention leans a little close to plot convenience, but it serves the story. It reinforces that Bruce can't win this war completely alone, but it stood out to me. Thankfully, neither issue was enough to pull me out of the experience. So, can Batman exist without billions? After 6 issues, I'd say yes. But like I said, I think that's the wrong question. Absolute Batman isn't trying to prove that Batman works without money. It's trying to remind us what made Batman worth caring about in the first place. The determination, the detective work, the compassion, the refusal to stop fighting, the belief that even when Gotham seems impossible to save, it is still worth trying. Those are the things that make Batman. The billions were just the bonus. If this first arc is any indication of where the Absolute Universe is heading, I completely understand why DC Studios wants to bring it to animation. And as for me, I'm in. I'm in the Dino Squad. Now, out of 10, how do you rate it? I think above 7, not because it's perfect, but because it did something I wasn't expecting. It made me rethink Batman. And honestly, that's one of the highest compliments I can give any Batman story. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Batman still works without the billions, or were the billions always part of what made him Batman in the first place?